see some people here who I think may have conflicts or thought they had conflicts, but welcome to everybody. My name is Dean Pierce, and I work for the Northwest Regional Planning Commission, and I'm going to be sharing the agenda. The first order of our agenda, or your agenda, is to decide if this agenda makes sense and would you like to make any additions or changes or adjustments to it. Also, just will mention that Catherine Dimitruk, the Executive Director of the Regional Planning Commission, will be the lead facilitator for this meeting. So without any further ado, Catherine, if you would like to take it away and see if there's consensus on this agenda.
I'm happy to. Thank you, Dean. I'm Catherine Dimitruk. I'm the Executive Director of the Northwest Regional Planning Commission and happy to welcome you all here today. Are there any recommended changes to the agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and jump right in. So we thought we'd start off our meeting by just doing some basic introductions, and you'll see later on the agenda, we have an opportunity for you to talk a little bit more about yourself and what interests you about this work. But for now, we'll just do basic introductions. Again, I'm Catherine Dimitruk. I'm Executive Director of Northwest Regional Planning Commission. And I'm going to turn it over to Jed to introduce himself. And Jed, after you do that, you can hand it over to the next person.
Okay, I'm Jed Pfeffer, and I'm a member of the Stewards of the Greensboro Watershed, which is a fairly recent organization, maybe 3 years. I don't know what else to say. I'm in Greensboro, Vermont. But since we're going to go more in depth with our interests, then I'll just wait until the end for anything else. And I guess I would choose Danielle next. I see her, her name is right across the screen. So
if I get my video to work. There we go. Hey everybody, my name is Danielle Ozarski and I am the watershed planner for the state of Vermont for the Lamoille Basin.
And you get to choose.
And yep, and I'll pick Brian Voigt.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Voigt. I'm the Senior Natural Resources Planner for the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, and I'm just here to observe the proceedings. I will choose Dia.
Hi, my name is Dea. I am the Assistant Water Quality Program Coordinator with the NRPC, and I assist Dean with some of the Clean Water Service Provider and Basin Water Quality Council roles. A lot of words here. I'm going to pass it to Tasha.
Oh, caught me off guard there. Hi, I'm Tasha Wallace. I'm the Executive Director of the Lamoille County Planning Commission, and we'll be working with Northwest on issues regarding the Lamoille, and I'm going to turn it over to Dick Goff.
I'm Dick Goff. I'm a member of the Board of Directors for the Lamoille County Planning Commission. And how do I figure out who to turn it over to?
Pick someone.
Is Jed done it already?
yes, yes.
All right, how about Sarah?
Sorry, I was late. Sarah Had, I'm the town manager for the town of Fairfax, former planner, floodplain, and other fun stuff. I apologize, just jumping out. I'm not sure what you want in terms of introductions or what people have done so far, but.
That's great, Sarah. And Sarah, you get to pick the next person.
And I don't know who's gone. Has Luke gone?
He hasn't. Luke?
You look like you're
Can't hear
saying
you, Luke.
something really interesting, but we can't hear you.
What about now?
Yeah, you're okay.
Cool. Sorry, my microphone is sometimes very strange. I'm Luke Brichetti. I'm an assistant planner at NRPC. And I'm mostly here to sort of assess the goings on of the council and see where I could be useful to assist Dean and Dea and Catherine with things related to the clean water service provider. And I will pass it over to Lauren.
Thanks, Luke. I'm Lauren Weston. I'm the district manager for the Franklin County Natural Resources Conservation District. There's a couple of towns in Franklin County in the Lamoille Basin, so happy to be here. I will pass to Emily. Now your mic's being wonky, Emily.
All right, how about now?
Better.
Emily Finnegan, I'm the district manager for the Caledonia County Conservation District. I am an alternate for the Basin Water Quality Council. Similar to Lauren, there are a few towns that we serve that are in the Lamoille Basin, most notably Hardwick is the town that's all the way in the Lamoille.
And Emily, do you want to pick someone? Do you want me to?
Yeah, no, I just am not used to that style. I like it though. Ken, go for it. Ken, are you with us?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Ken Mink, I'm a secretary on the Georgia Conservation Commission in Georgia, Vermont. I'm an alternate. And you guys will have to pick the next one because I don't know who's gone.
Hi, this is Bruce Wheeler from Wolcott.
Kent Henderson. Sorry, my video is not working. I'd love to be one of the shining faces up there, but just not happening right now. I'm the chair of the Friends of Northern Lake Champlain. We live at the very end of the water basin in Georgia Center, Vermont.
Hi, I'm Steve Libby with the Vermont River Conservancy.
Hi, this is Bruce Wheeler from Wolcott.
What can I do for you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Yeah, I'm working for him to do the reappraisal. I'm not the town listener.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
What do you need, Mr. Rooney?
Oh, I'm just wondering. With my.
I'm
Peter Danforth with district manager for Lamoille County Conservation District. And I'll pass it on to, I guess, did Kate go yet?
Kate, you're muted.
Sorry about that. What a rookie mistake. I am the zoning administrator in the town of Westford, and we have our regulations in Westford are very much driven around water quality protections, and we are a rural town, so that's my area of interest.
And I see we have Chris.
I was trying to get away without being seen. Hi, everybody. It's Chris Rotler. I work with the state and work with Danielle, and I've been behind the scenes working with Catherine and Dean on the clean water service provider rule and guidance and governance stuff, helping to get it stood up. So I don't think I'll be here for the whole meeting, but I appreciate you letting me lurk and see how you're doing. Thank you. Nice to meet all of you.
Thanks, Chris. Did we miss anybody so far?
I think
is my audio working?
It is.
Oh, okay. I'm from Wolcott. I'm on the Planning Commission and the DRB, and the Lamoille River runs. I've grown up here. My relatives founded the town many years ago, and the Lamoille River runs through the town, and they're working on economic development in the town associated with the river somewhat.
I think Catherine Sonic has not gone.
I just realized that, yeah.
And Fran, did Fran go?
No.
I'm Catherine Sonic, and I'm the planner in the town of Jericho, and I'm an alternate.
I'm Fran. I'm the chair of the Belvedere Planning Commission and also an alternate.
And with that, is that everybody this time?
Did Megan go?
Nope, I'm Megan Brodier, regional planner with Lamoille County Planning Commission. And I'm just here observing the meeting. And one of my roles is to focus on water quality planning.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us here today. It's nice to see some familiar faces and to meet some new people. It really sounds like we have a really amazing group of people gathering together to work in the Lamoille Basin. So this is pretty exciting. Dean, what is next on the agenda?
Next on the agenda is the expectations of the host.
Thank you.
And then we will recognize alternates.
Great. So thank you. So we wanted to just kind of set the tone for this first meeting. Since we don't have a chair or vice chair, we thought it made sense for me, who has nothing to do with the WIC otherwise, to go ahead and facilitate this meeting. We're really hoping that we can continue the culture of collaboration that exists already in the Lamoille Basin. We have the same thing in the Missisquoi, and it's really wonderful. And we wanted to extend that to all the meetings of the Basin Water Quality Council. So although there's people who are actual members and alternate members and some here listening, we'd really like to just keep the meeting informal. And if you have a question or comment, you don't need to be an official member to raise your hand or offer a comment. So we just wanted to set the tone for our expectations of how we hope the meeting goes. In terms of what we need to accomplish, we have one official action we have to do, which is to seat the alternates, and we'll do that next. And the remainder of the meeting will really be focused on two things. One is providing background and information so that everybody who participates on the Basin Water Quality Council has at least the same amount of minimum information. And then the second is to get to know each other and to set our stage for what's going to be happening at the upcoming meetings. I'll apologize in advance for some of you who are serve on the Missisquoi Basin Water Quality Council as well, because some of this will be repeat for you. But so I'll apologize in advance, but it's all great information. Any questions about our intentions for the rest of the meeting? All right, so the first thing that we need to do, the official action, is to recognize the alternate representative. So the rule, which was put in place to implement the Clean Water Service Provider model, requires that the alternates be approved by the Basin Water Quality Council and recognized by the council. And Dean, do you have a list of those alternates that you can share with us?
I do. And those folks are coming up on the screen momentarily. Sorry about the delay there, folks. So I will read them, hoping people can see that they include for this district, Emily Finnegan from the Caledonia NRCD, Remy from the Winooski NRCD, Lori Fisher from the Lake Champlain Committee, two separate municipal alternates, that would be Catherine Sonic from Jericho and Ken Nink from Georgia. And finally, also Fran Levitt, an alternate municipal rep from the town of Belvedere.
Dean, can I add two that are from the Greensboro Stewards group? I mean, I guess I didn't send them to you, so I should have done that.
The alternates would be in connection with the watershed protection organizations. And if
Oh.
I'm not mistaken, I'm sorry, if I'm misunderstanding, are you talking about folks from the stewardship organization who would be alternates from what sector, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same watershed protection organization.
Okay. If I'm not mistaken, the group of watershed organizations would need to say those folks would be in the mix as being alternate reps. So I guess I don't believe that they could be added discussion amongst all the watershed organizations, unless you can tell me that when the watershed organizations met together in the gathering that was facilitated by Lynn Munno, that those folks were identified then.
Yeah, no, they weren't.
I believe that those folks, there could be such a meeting and those folks could be identified through that. And then at a future meeting of the council, they could be added then.
Okay, just if you can, email me and let me know how I would go about that, then I can do that. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that great question, Jed. That gets to the complicated nature of the statute and the rule around these basin water quality councils and how each individual member is appointed. So Dean presented the list of alternates. I'm curious if we can have a motion from one of the seated official members, if there could be a motion to accept the alternates.
I
So
move to
moved.
accept. Second.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to accept the alternates as presented by Dean, recognizing that we'll be expecting some additional alternates at a future meeting. Is there any discussion about that motion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We have official alternates. Congratulations and welcome officially as alternates to the Basin Water Quality Council. Next, I believe I turn it over to you, Dean.
Thank you, Catherine. And something I just want to ask to help out Dea, who's working on notes and eventually minutes. The maker of that motion, I think there were a couple of voices. I heard at least one of them was Kate Lally. And as a second, I believe at least one of them was Jed. I'm hoping that that's accurate. And if it is, then Dea will have the information that she needs. Then another question, there is someone participating in the meeting as iPhone, and we just want to make sure we know who that person is. So, and maybe you've identified yourself and I didn't catch it before, but iPhone, if you haven't introduced yourself, if we could just have your name for the minutes, that would also be helpful. Does anyone know iPhone? Well, that may be something that we can come back to in a less bashful moment, perhaps. I'm going to be sharing my screen again because where we are at this point in time is making some presentations that will give you some context. I'm hoping people can see a slide that mentions that. Could someone give me a thumbs up to just confirm that? Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about Act 76 and the Clean Water Service Provider Rule. Catherine will be talking about the open meeting law and public records requirements. And then we will have a discussion about the timeline and some of the main calendar items. And I'm going to just jump right in on Act 76 and the implementing rule. This will be redundant for some of you who've participated in the Missisquoi meeting or in earlier meetings, and I'm going to go fairly quickly and try to leave some time for questions if people have them. Act 76, of course, is the name, the handle that's been given to the Clean Water Service Delivery Act of 2019. It does some important things, providing long-term funding, supporting non-regulatory stormwater projects. It establishes the clean water service providers and the organization that you all are now part of, the Basin Water Quality Councils. And it also establishes or makes part of the government infrastructure for the work we're doing, the phosphorus targets, and creates grant programs. The rule that's related to Act 76 has the purpose of assigning the task of the clean water service providers for each basin. The Northwest Regional Planning Commission is the only organization that is currently staffing 2 roles or 2 basins. It has definitions, it has language regarding the clean water service providers and technical implementation, conflict of interest, review of progress, a lot of technical requirements that you might expect in a set of rules that are written to implement a statute. So the clean water service providers, that's the role that the Northwest Regional Planning Commission is fulfilling in both the Missisquoi and the Lamoille basins. What do they do? What do we do? Well, we support the Basin Water Quality Councils. We are essentially the staff for the councils. We identify and implement, non-regulatory projects that will help us meet the phosphorus reduction targets that have been set. And I'll talk a little bit more about those. We have the responsibility for the projects, but we ourselves are not the ones who in most cases will be doing those projects. The folks who will be doing those projects are our partners. So we establish partnerships and subcontract work, although in many cases we have existing relationships with those partner organizations. The clean water service providers will also be responsible over time for verifying that projects that have been built or installed or what have you, we will verify that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and that they're being maintained. We will have a role in ensuring that this work happens in a way that's consistent with the tactical basin plan, and the tactical basin planning process is something that Danielle, who introduced herself earlier, works on for DEC. And as part of our work, we will be helping the Basin Water Quality Council consider co-benefits, other benefits in addition to phosphorus reduction benefits when it's prioritizing projects. In the rule goes on to talk about how the the clean water service providers will have 5-year agreements. The amount of funding that is distributed is based on the size of the pollution target. So in watersheds where there's a larger target, there is greater funding. We will also be responsible for providing guidance to those partners who I mentioned earlier will be doing the vast amount of work actually developing and implementing projects. So we will help them by giving them easy access to the funds, or as easy as we can make it, by having very clear procurement guidelines. We are going to try to pre-qualify our partners as much as we can so that the process of getting them engaged and doing work is as easy as possible. We have to follow management guidelines flowing through DEC, and we also will be responsible for engaging the public and following the open meetings law, which is something that Catherine will talk about in just a moment. As for the councils, the work that you all will be helping with is to provide local water quality knowledge. We're not the local experts, you are the local experts. So we're going to be trying to leverage that, and the councils will be trying to leverage that. The councils will also be establishing policy that helps guide the work of the clean water service provider. And the law and the rule are very clear that one major task of the council is to make decisions about the most significant water quality problems in the basin. And you will be prioritizing the projects that will help us meet the targets and improve water quality. The councils will also have a role in the basin planning process. This next slide is somewhat redundant, at least the first part. Just pulled some of the language from the rule, establish policy, prioritize. You can read those. The councils will meet at least 4 times a year, although we suspect that as they get started, it'll be more necessary to meet monthly for a time before things are up and running. There will need to be a quorum met in order to meet, as is the case with public bodies. A majority vote of the members is required for binding action to be made. As we talked about earlier in this session, there's provision for alternates. There are some procedures that are to be followed in order to have alternates recognized. But we've taken an important step by getting alternates on board. And there's also language and rule that governs what happens in the case of a conflict of interest. When a person who is a member of the council is facing a situation where a project that their organization or their sponsor, I guess for lack of a better term, I will call it, if their project is before the group and is being voted on, that member would recuse themselves, but they can answer questions about the project. But the voter in that case would actually move to someone who is an alternate. Other participants in this process include DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation. They set the targets. They've been working on guidance material. They will help disperse the funds and monitor our progress. Clean Water Board is an organization that's responsible for making recommendations about funding. And then again, not putting them last because they're least, because they're not, the partner organizations that we will be working very closely with. And for people who are a little bit more graphically oriented, or just to repeat what I've been talking about, here's another way of presenting some of the same information. Well, I take just a second to catch my breath here. And I should say that these slides will be available and will be distributed along with the minutes, if not before. This slide shows that in the coming fiscal year, the number that we're working with is $7 million, of which, and then also that is not including basin planning funding, but it's $7 million statewide to fund the clean water service providers. As I said, that money is distributed to the basins based on the size of the pollution targets. The projects that can be pursued in order to meet the targets are very diverse. So I think it's important just to run through a list like this to explain that they could include things like a stormwater pond to treat runoff from developed land, stormwater practices on private roads or other roads that are not subject to the municipal general roads permit. They also include things that may not be in people's normal routine as stormwater projects, but maybe for some of you, yes. Floodplain restoration would be an eligible project. Riparian buffers, non-regulated farm activities or non-agronomic activities on farmland that could be farmland buffers, restoring wetlands, conserving forest land. The point again is that a wide range of projects can be pursued and implemented using this funding. They're eligible with the guidepost being we're looking to meet the phosphorus targets And we're also in cases going to be able to consider co-benefits. There's going to need to be a lot of work on project development to prime the pump, so to speak, to have projects. There are projects in the pipeline. There will need to be more projects in the pipeline, and a certain percentage, I believe right now, the discussion is that 7% in the first year could go towards these project identification and early project development activities. Okay, so I'm going to talk a moment about pollution targets. The targets that we're working with come from the Lake Champlain TMDL, the total maximum daily load study, which essentially establishes the budget for how much phosphorus can flow into Lake Champlain from the land in the Lake Champlain Basin. The amount of phosphorus that flows into the lake was distributed amongst the different basins. And what this graph shows is the magnitude of the reduction that we would be looking at from lands in the Lamoille Basin. So somewhere between 68,000 kilograms down to something in the range of 55,000 of phosphorus between now and 2036. So it is, it's a reduction. It's not a scary magnitude of reduction, but it's going to take all of us to work hard to meet it. Here's another graphic to show that information in a slightly different way. We have on the left-hand bar what the total amount of phosphorus has been historically. The 2036 allowance shows what it should be in 2036. And then in terms of the reduction, a good part of the reduction in Lamoille Basin will happen as a result of regulations, and the balance would be through non-regulated activities that are going to fall under the responsibility of the QUISPs and the Basin Water Quality Councils.
Dean, you have a question in the chat before you move off. Is that graphic showing that forest has no targeted forest phosphorus reduction?
Yes, at present, that is what it says. That the way that it is saying that as far as meeting phosphorus reduction on the forest, it's assumed to happen through existing regulated activities, and that additional investment on the non-regulatory side, it didn't result in forest land activities getting a portion of the target.
To clarify one more follow-up, the Basin Water Quality Council could still choose to fund non-regulatory forest-based practices if they contribute to the phosphorus reduction target.
Yes. And the reason why I didn't remove it entirely is, thank you for that. The reason I didn't remove it entirely is because this segmentation of the phosphorus reduction into these different sectors helps us understand where the numbers come from. However, when it comes to meeting targets, the total is what's important. So it doesn't, this graphic doesn't mean to say that the percentage of that 57% of the projects don't have to be in developed land, and 18% have to be in farm, and 25. No, that isn't the requirement. The requirement is to try to meet the target reduction overall. And we could decide to emphasize one particular sector, and we could decide, you could decide to also use forest projects to contribute to that reduction.
Ian, I have one more sort of follow-up if you have time.
Sure. I'm
curious, what is defined as stream reduction? So maybe this might be a loaded question, I'm not sure, but yeah, is that, only perennial streams? Can you speak a little bit more to that?
I can, but I think I'm going to probably end up wishing I hadn't. So I will promise to deal with that question offline and give a good solid answer to it rather than to try to do so now. But I will address that.
Okay.
One thing to do is to be able to admit when you don't have a good answer. And I should have a better one, but I don't, so I'm not prepared. Just moving on, in terms, I said $7 million is the amount of funding in total for all of the basins. Out of that total of $7 million, the Lamoille Basin is being allocated a figure of about $643,000, so not quite 10%. I won't get into the technical details of behind that number. I can answer questions, but suffice it to say there is a formula. This is called the funding formula, and there is a formula that drives this distribution of funding. And the Lamoille is one of 3 basins, I believe that it is essentially receiving an amount of funding that is a floor level that provides the funding that was deemed necessary to be able to operate a successful program.
Just a
Now,
question.
Sure, Jed.
Yeah, so the basins that go into the Connecticut River, or let's say into the Hudson River, those are not included then in this plan in any way.
Right, we are talking about the Lake Champlain Basin. And some point in the future, there may be something similar to this. The rule was written in a way that I would say it's flexible. It won't require a bunch of amendments because they specifically say Lake Champlain. The rule has got language that is forward-looking and considers the possibility those other watersheds will be doing something similar in the future. But the numbers that we're talking about here are specific to the Lake Champlain Basin. So the amount of funding available, as I said, is being, it reflects the size of the problem. Essentially $643,000 divided by a typical number and expense of projects means that we have these working values for the reduction targets in the first year of about 40 kilograms total that will need to be obtained to meet that first year target. So that is the first set of numbers, and it's going to be lower than what the average reduction would be, but it's the amount that is seen to be doable using the funding that's available. If that is clear, I hope that it is. There's an extensive database of projects, and that database has their cost and it has their phosphorus reduction value, I'll call it. And the DEC can use that information to take the total and estimate how much phosphorus would be a reasonable amount of phosphorus to remove given that amount of funding. Just so people can understand, well, what does 40 kilograms per year look like, or what might it look like? A single gravel wetland project on in a 17-acre or treating a 17-acre watershed that I'm familiar with is 7 kilograms per year. So if there were 5 or 6 of those, well, that could basically take care of the target. A 3-acre floodplain and buffer restoration project has been used in some training that I've seen, and that could reduce 10 kilograms. So we're not talking about an astronomical number of projects to be completed to meet the goals. That's the good news. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to just skip by this project or just touch on it very, very briefly. And that is to say that this initial amount of funding is getting our toe in the water, so to speak. It's not going to put us on a pace of meeting all of the target if we kept on doing it. In other words, we're going to have to ramp up the amount of work that we do in future years. Or the targets will have to come down, but that's not where things are at. I think unless there are any further questions, it's the time to switch things over to Catherine to talk about the open meetings law and public records requirements. Any hands up I'm not seeing since I don't have my, stop sharing.
Hey, Dean, this is Lauren Weston. I actually do have a question. I don't know if you have the answer to this or not. Do you know if block grants from DEC are still going to be available in basins with QUISPs, or is this replacing that, or just different?
So this question has come up before, and because Chris Rottler is here, despite his desire to keep a low profile, he may want to speak to this better. But I think that it's going to probably be a situation where those funds will transition into the QUISP. I think that's just the most brief way I would put it. But there are certainly some projects that are underway now that would be completed. But I think that's the quickest way to address it. The possibility exists for the councils and the QUISP to establish what amounts to a regionalized version of block grants, perhaps, but.
Hi, this is Peter Danforth from Lamoille County Conservation District. Lauren, I think Holden today said that 2024 things would run out for our block grants through them anyways. And that things like Trees for Streams and other alternate types of funding are still going to be available, but not our program implementation, design implement block grants. I think 2024 is going to be the kind of the end time for that.
Yeah, if you have specific funds that flow through your statewide organization, it does sound like those are going to be moved to the QUISP process, but not immediately. Okay. Catherine, would you like to take over from here on public records and open meeting?
Happy to, Dean. And apologies to those of you who have already been through this once, but I'm going to go through a really high-level overview of Vermont's open meeting and public records laws, just to give the context for the work that the Basin Water Quality Counselors are going to be doing. I'll start off by saying that regardless of what you heard, in my opinion, the open meeting and public records laws are not something to be feared. They're actually something to be celebrated. To me, it's one of the things that makes Vermont government accessible, trustworthy, and something that citizens can feel like they're a part of. And so we talked to you about this to celebrate the law and what it brings to Vermont and our open government and our transparency. So, general overview of Vermont's open meeting law. In general, open meeting law requires all meetings of public bodies to be open to the public. That's it in a nutshell. It's very simple in terms of its overall intent. Some of the details are a little more complicated and precise, but the intent is very clear and straightforward. It requires that the public be allowed to know about meetings through advance notice. It requires all business and actions to be done in an open meeting. It requires public bodies to allow the public to attend and participate. And it requires you to take minutes, a record of the meeting, and make them available to the public. At the core of the open meeting law is two definitions. The first is what is a public body, and the second is what is a meeting. In terms of the open meeting law, a public body is very clear. It's any board, council, committee of any of the state or any one of its political subdivisions. That applies to the Basin Water Quality Councils because you're doing the work on behalf of the state and you're a public body established in statute. It also includes any committees or subcommittees of those boards or councils, regardless of size. So if this BWQ were to establish a formal subcommittee to work on one item or another, those subcommittees would also be under the open meeting law. If the BWQ is about to do something and Jed and Peter volunteer to talk about it and bring an idea back to the BWQ and it's not an official subcommittee, then that's not a public body. But anything that's officially established by the BWQ would be a public body. The next key component of the open meeting law is what is a meeting? So a meeting is defined whenever a majority or a quorum is gathered. And that gathering is to discuss business or take action. If a majority of you find yourselves at a statewide water quality conference in the next year or two, that's not a public meeting. That's just you happen to be in the same place. But every time you gather to actually do business or take action, a majority of you, then that's a meeting. It also applies to email conversations. So if a majority of you are involved in an email conversation about the business of the BWQ, then that would be a violation of the open meeting law because it wouldn't be open to the public and the public wouldn't be able to participate. There's some narrow exceptions to that about setting agendas and sharing information in advance of meetings. Ways people try to get around that, such as serial communication or daisy chain communication, where I would contact one of you and then you contact the next one, or I contact all of you individually to get your opinion on something before a meeting. That's also a violation of open meeting law because it would constitute a meeting because the majority would be involved in the discussion. In more recent years, we've had to think about texts, online editing, and social media and how they may be considered a meeting. Example that's been used a lot in the past is if, let's say, a public body has a Facebook page and someone posts something of issue for that public body and a majority of the members weigh in the comments about how they think that public body should vote on a certain item, that could be considered a violation of open meeting law. Some other key elements of the law are notice, agenda, and minutes. So the notices must be posted 48 hours in advance for regular meetings or 24 hours for special meetings. Public bodies generally set a regular day and time for when they meet. They don't have to, but they generally do. Agendas have to be posted in several locations and online. They have to include enough detail so if I, as a member of the public, would be able to understand what's being discussed. Once the agenda is set, it can only be changed as the first item on the agenda. And that's really there to protect the public from finding out later that something happened in the meeting that you didn't know was supposed to happen. And then all agendas must include a location of the meeting or full details on how to access virtually. Minutes of all meetings have to be taken and made available within 5 days. The minutes have to include everyone who is there, all of the motions and resolutions and results of votes. There is an exception to the requirement that all meetings are open to the public, and that's executive session and also deliberative session, which I didn't add here. Executive session allows public bodies to meet in private under really limited circumstances. In those cases, executive session, a motion to enter executive session has to be made and passed in the open part of the meeting. You can invite legal counsel, staff, etc., who are part of the discussion to join in. And you can't take any formal action in executive session unless it's a real estate purchase. Examples of executive session can include contract negotiations, if premature public knowledge could put the public body at a disadvantage. It could include personnel records. It could include public safety items. There's a long list in statute. I've been thinking a lot about whether the Basin Water Quality Councils may have occasion to go into an executive session, and I can't really think of any at this moment, but if one should arise where there would be an idea, we'll make sure we do it all properly and that it really does qualify for executive session. Virtual meetings are allowed under the open meeting law. Under the underlying law, you have to also have a physical location available to the public, and roll call votes are required if the votes aren't unanimous. There were temporary changes passed at the beginning of the pandemic and repassed this session that says a physical location is not required for virtual meetings, and they won't be required again until January of 2023. Public access by phone has to be enabled for every fully virtual meeting, and fully virtual meetings of legislative bodies and school boards have to be recorded. The second major law that applies to our work is Vermont's public records law. This applies to all public agencies, of which the Clean Water Service Provider and the Basin Water Quality Council fall under. So public records have to be open to the public for inspection and copying, and members of the public have a right to inspect and copy public documents unless it's exempt from disclosure. And similar to executive session for open meetings, there's a whole long list of things that are exempt from disclosure. Records have to be made available during the customary office hours, and they must also be retained by the public body. This applies to paper records as well as electronic records like emails. Additionally, the public body can charge a fee for access to those records, but then there are limits to that within statute and court cases. So putting those two laws into practice, what does this mean for the Basin Water Quality Council and what you need to know about your responsibilities? For the open meeting law, NRPC is the Clean Water Service Provider, will ensure that the meeting notices, agendas, and minutes comply with the law, both their content and their posting. The chair, when you elect one, will facilitate the meeting to ensure that the public has a right to comment in the meeting and maintain that portion of the open meeting law. For public records, the NRPC, as the Clean Water Service Provider, will retain all the official records of the Basin Water Quality Council and will respond to any public records requests. You, as individual Basin Water Quality Council members, should think about a few things. First, if you get an email, try not to reply to all if it's about an issue of substance, or don't send a meeting to all on your own accord about an issue of substance before the Basin Water Quality Council. If you have emails or texts about Basin Water Quality Council business that don't include a member of the Clean Water Service Provider staff, you need to retain those as a public record. And then finally, just generally respect and celebrate the intent of the laws for what they're intended to do, which is really to foster a culture of trust and open government in Vermont. We'll provide this presentation to you, and in it you'll see links to the full text of the open meeting law, Vermont's open meeting law guide, and the public records law guide. So those can be available to you if you have some more detailed questions. And then I'm happy to take questions.
Catherine, there is one question that was put in the chat. Emily wrote, she's wondering if public records law would apply to specific construction budgets for clean water projects, especially for larger projects that will be put out to bid for construction.
So there are limits to what's public when it comes to proprietary information and procurement procedures. Oftentimes specific proposal budgets are private until a contract has been reached and executed with a selected provider. But if you have, a project report that has construction estimates in it, it's not my understanding that that is private, that is a public record. Did that answer the question?
Sort of. It's come up specifically with a project of mine where the person requested the grant amount for that was for the construction. So I guess I couldn't really tell where that piece of information as it relates to like the text of the grant would fall in what you just said.
I think the grant amount would be public.
But divided out, right? Like, because the full grant amount, do you see what I mean? Like the full grant amount is not just the construction, it's like beyond that. So I guess I just bring it up. It doesn't need to be answered specifically right now.
Yeah, okay, that's a really good question. When we do procurement for these larger projects, it's definitely a fine line to walk between what is available publicly, what you want to proactively share publicly, and what you want to make available should someone request it, and what you have to make available. I still think, I'm not an attorney, I should say, I still think what they're asking for is considered a public record, but there may be instances where we are going to need to check with our legal counsel just to make sure that we're complying with the law.
I would just throw out also that the work of the council will be to get projects done that, and in a cost-effective way. So understanding where the dollars that it's providing are going may necessitate the council knowing the breakdown between yes, if there's a total grant amount, the council would want to know that there's a reasonable amount that's going to administration, and that in terms of the project type, that it's ultimately the per unit costs are comparable with other projects of the same type. So it may be hard to avoid needing that information.
Any additional comments or questions?
If not, Catherine, I would be happy to take the baton back and
Great.
run through the calendar.
Sounds good, Dean.
And so I'm hoping people can see this. The work that's been ongoing can be described in phases. Phase 1 has included setting up a website, and I should put in the chat in a minute the URL, the web address for the pages on the Northwest RPC's website that have to do with the clean water service providers and the basin councils. But phase 1 included setting up the web pages on the website, establishing our QUISP and WIC specific grant and contracting system, working on some add-ons that will work with DEC's existing project tracking system, making sure our accounting systems and our accounting systems line up with what the requirements will be. And there are also a series of policies that the clean water service provider needs to have in place. We will also be managing invoices. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is where we are right now, mostly. That's going to include creating the councils, which we've done, congratulations, but also providing or determining what training needs there are. Another major piece of work for the councils will be to develop or to review a draft that's prepared for it of bylaws. And then one specific policy that the councils are to adopt have to do with public participation. So adopting rules of procedure or bylaws, adopting a participation policy, those are 2 things that will be on your agendas in the not too distant future. Also looking at commenting on the procurement procedures and guidance that the QUISP will be responsible for creating, things that I had mentioned earlier. Phase 3, so-called, is really kind of a blending between the startup phase and when things really hit their stride and things are operating the way they will on into the future. We will be fully implementing project management and tracking and helping the council with the co-benefit scoring and looking at things like the documents that are needed so that the QUISP will in the future have the ability to go in and inspect and monitor sites to make sure. So those are the phases. In terms of the council itself, electing a chair and vice chair is one of the short-term tasks. Reviewing and adopting the rules of procedure, as I mentioned, this public participation policy and training, longer term or medium term, providing direction to us as the QUISP, establishing policies that will be used to figure out how we're going to meet the pollution reduction targets. A longer term, things will probably get more formalized and there will be more systems in place for ranking and prioritizing projects. We had set up time right now for about a 5-minute break before we enter into the next phase of this meeting. My clock says 2:03, so if people are willing, we can give you 5 and let's reassemble at 2:08. Hopefully that sounds all right. We'll see folks in 5 minutes. Crack at that.
So our meetings are posted online on the NRPC website. We also utilize the towns of North Hero and St. Albans City as our municipal posting locations. We'd like to work with Lamoille County Planning Commission to figure out what makes sense for posting, and Chittenden, to figure out what makes sense for posting in the remainder of the basin. I think our basic requirements are met, but we'd like to expand our postings. Additionally, we do have our email list, which includes a long list of people, and who are willing to add anybody to that wants to be added.
Thank you, Catherine. So if there are no disagreements with it, then perhaps we can move on to the portion of our meeting that is a more discussion phase. And it's a roundtable is how we've described it. And we thought we would give folks a chance to explain why they chose to become involved with service on the Basin Water Quality Council. So is there anyone who would like to begin that discussion? Feeling ready to do that? We'd very much appreciate it. Looks like Jed was giving a high sign. Is that a yes? We would want your mic on.
Okay, is that okay now?
Excellent.
Okay, so I've been a member of the Stewards of the Greensboro Watershed for around 3 years. And my experience with the Lamoille has been somewhat as a fly fisherman, both through, well, probably all the way towards Milton, but most of it has occurred up in the upper watershed. So I have an interest in the stream and what's been going on in the stream, especially in the upper watershed for a while. I wanted to have a much broader view of the Lamoille. So that was probably my main interest, was to get together with people that lived along the watershed in different places. And so I could hear about what was going on from, different voices, and perhaps from people that had more experience than I do. I'm a relatively recent year-round resident of Vermont, although I've been coming up here since I was a teenager. So I think primarily it was to become, educated in a much broader view of what's going on the river, what can be done to improve it, and how that would happen, the process that would take place for that to occur. And it seemed like this was a good opportunity to learn about the river and also to influence what happens on the river. I'm also a member of the Native Fish Coalition, so I have an interest in the brook trout populations and the tributaries that go into the Lamoille, and hopefully do something to improve the water quality in those as well. So that's pretty much it.
That's great, Jed. Thank you for that. Who would like to go next to share why they chose to serve on the Basin Water Quality Council? Richard, go right ahead.
This is Dick Goff. As a member of the Lamoille County Planning Commission Board of Directors, I thought it was important that we have representation on the council. and put my name and as a possible person if no one else was interested. And here I am. Quite simple. I do live in Cambridge, and the Lamoille River does pass right through, and I've done various canoeing and kayaking on the river. So it is an important resource for all of us.
Thanks, Dick. Sarah, do I see you reaching for your mute button?
Sorry, I have to admit, I'm working off of a laptop, and to get the camera to be on, it's all microscopic. So if you see me doing this, that's so I transitioned in June to the town manager in Fairfax. So I'm new to the Lamoille River, but I've been hanging out for the past 20 years professionally on Lake Champlain and Colchester, very much entwined with floodplain, on-site septic management, a lot of water quality stuff. So definitely a love and passion of mine, and sort of goes to the same I heard before of I'd like to sort of explore and know a little bit more now about the Lamoille River, which is right in the middle of our beautiful village, and how it relates, and get to know sort of the watershed a little bit more, and also hope that I can bring something to the table in terms of some different aspects of water quality. So thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Who would like to go next to talk about why you chose to serve on the Basin Water Quality Council?
This is Kent. I'll jump in. I'm really sorry that my video is not working today, and I've got to get this figured out because we're going to have our board meeting an hour after I get done here. So I'm going to try to figure that out. Yeah, I'm the chair of a watershed group that's been in existence for 20 years. And in that time, we were involved with passing the legislation that has gotten us to this point. And this our organization felt like this would be a continuation of the work that we've been doing for so many years. So I look upon myself as a representative of the Friends of Northern Lake Champlain, and don't have any real vested interest or projects that we're going to put forward, but just to have an idea of the process and how it's going to work, and make sure that these dollars are getting spent correctly.
Thanks, Kent. The floor is open for whoever wants to jump in next.
I can go. So I think that for a different answer than last time, I think being on the Basin Water Quality Council feels important to make sure that we're prioritizing all of the co-benefits of clean water projects and making sure that we're not just having tunnel vision around phosphorus. So I'm looking forward to advocating for that when possible. And I think too, it's a really interesting group of folks on the Water Quality Council. I feel like I'm in a lot of groups all the time, but it's not usually this mix. So it's really exciting to be able to build this community and kind of work with people that I don't get to normally work with.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Bruce, did you seem like you're ready to go?
Hi, yes. I live in Wolcott and grew up in Wolcott. And in the early days, the Lamoille River runs through Wolcott. And in early days, there was a general store in Wolcott that would take their trash every day and dump it into the Lamoille River. Wolcott's moving ahead with the town forest, a 300-acre town forest. We have received a grant for $197,000 to put a trail from the rail trail up to the elementary school in the town forest. And we don't have a wastewater system in town, so we probably have a wastewater problem flowing into the Lamoille. So I'm just very interested in helping to clean up the Lamoille River. I'm also, I dabble in what's called Internet of Things, little devices that can remotely measure such things as phosphorus or water quality in different ways. And my hope is to set up something in the Lamoille River in Wolcott to measure some of those qualities.
Great, thanks, Bruce. Let's see, who still has to go? Emily or Peter?
I can go.
Great, Peter, thanks.
Yes, so, district manager for Lamoille County Conservation District, and, I'd say a majority of our work has to do with clean water, although those other benefits that Lauren was speaking of. And, we work with everyone in county as far as municipalities, private landowners, farmers. We work on river projects, lake projects, stormwater projects, stream projects. So I feel like it's kind of, we obviously should be part of the, at least being a source of information. And also what I'm really excited about, as Lauren said, is that our network is expanded because, we would certainly work with a group of people on a normal basis, but I'm glad that we're getting to reach out to more watershed groups that we don't normally work with. And that's always been a priority for me. So this is great.
Thanks so much, Peter. And Emily, did you want to go ahead? Oh, can't hear you.
How about now? There we go.
Yes, congratulations.
Thanks. I'm the district manager of Caledonia County Conservation District, like I said before, and we do have some towns that are in the Lamoille. And so in terms of projects that we do, how the QUISP operates and what types of grants are given out and projects prioritized does affect us, but not quite as much as some of the other basins. But I'm a person that likes to really learn about things slowly. And so attending these meetings and sort of like absorbing all this information, I think will help in the future once there is inevitably a QUISP for the basins in which we work more heavily. So I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. Steve, do you look like you'd like to jump in?
Yeah, hi, everybody. Steve Libby, I'm the executive director of the Vermont River Conservancy, and we're, for those of you who don't know us, we're basically a land trust that do conservation projects along rivers. And we've done a lot of river corridor easements across the state and floodplain restoration projects. We also, public access is really a high priority for us. So I'm totally with Lauren on the co-benefits side of this. And basically we agreed to join because there is a slot for land conservation organizations on the council, and talked it over with the other statewide groups to kind of distribute ourselves amongst the different basins. So we are definitely interested in doing projects. And so we'll try and kind of thread that needle of, looking at what type of projects will meet the goals, but also to try and encourage kind of a diversity of projects, some of which might include land conservation work. I also just want to also say that when I say we and the other conservation groups who work across, like we're going to work in every single one of the QUISP basins, and we're very interested in having consistent procedures, like in the phase one that Dean was talking about before, that there's consistent sort of accounting, invoicing policies and that sort of thing. So just would love to kind of talk more about that when it's appropriate. So thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Catherine or Kate or anybody else like to jump in and share why you're looking? Oh, Fran, I see you're turning your camera on.
Well, I'd love to go after Steve because I blame him. I live up here in Belvedere, and he came up to look at, we have a piece of our land that's being really heavily eroded by the north branch of the Lamoille River, and got to talking about some of the work that his organization did and some funding opportunities that were available for rivers. My background is in river conservation, but I admit I'm from Quebec, where it's really hydroelectric dams that threaten our rivers. And so it's like this big, it's very clear who we're fighting against. And in moving to Vermont, it's sort of these like quieter questions about how to protect our rivers. I'm an avid whitewater canoeist, spent a lot of time on Lamoille, met my husband on Lamoille, and now call, the North Branch of Lamoille home. So just sort of felt like it was a good thing to become a part of, and listen in on some of this stuff and figure out more about what opportunities exist for rural communities that exist on these rivers.
Thanks so much, Fran. We have a message from Catherine that she'll be able to jump in at some point. But I think, who else haven't we heard from besides Kate?
This is Ken. I just have a couple comments about Georgia.
Oh, yes. Hi, Ken.
So Georgia has 2 streams that are both 303 delisted, and they both have TMDLs that are due, but have not been forthcoming. So I'd like to see what status of those are. One feeds the Lamoille directly, and the other feeds Lake Champlain. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken. Hi, Kate.
Hi. So Westford is a rural town in Chittenden County that aspires to stay rural, which is a struggle for us. We're constantly trying to not become a suburb of Essex. So a lot of our land use regulations are recognize the ecosystem service that undeveloped land provides, particularly undeveloped rural lands. And so I'm kind of interested in the offsetting that can provide to support more intensive walkable urban places where that, of all scales, where that makes sense to be, so that we can kind of get away from a car-oriented, sprawl-dependent landscape. Because I think if Vermont continues in that way, it's not going to be good for the state. And we're going to be getting climate refugees here, so we need to get ready for that. So I'm interested in how we can start to set up some of that kind of paradigm change way of thinking about things.
Thank you, Kate. Catherine, it looks like you're ready.
I'm ready, yeah. So being a planner in also a rural-ish town in Chittenden County, I've been able to do some local planning with stormwater and some developments and just general visionary planning. So I have a sort of a small picture, and I'm really excited to be a part of the larger picture and see what's going on throughout the basin and other counties. And so I feel like I've got a lot to learn too. So I'm really interested in that part.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Is there anybody else that is yet to go and share why you're part of the Basin Water Quality Council, whether as a member alternate? Well, I'll just take a minute to say thank you. Dean, Dea, and I, and some other folks, including Luke on occasion, can really get bogged down in the administrivia that's part of building any sort of new structure like this. And it's really wonderful just to take a moment back and hear from all of you about your interests, your expertise, your reasons why, and just be inspired again to be reminded about why we're doing all of this work. And so it's my favorite part of the agenda so far, 2 meetings in a row. So thank you all. It's really nice to get to know all of you a little bit better. And I'm really glad that you're part of this whole effort. So next, the thing that we want to talk to you about is the election of chair and vice chair. So since you're all still getting to know each other, we didn't put it on the agenda as an action item this month. We anticipated that you might like to take a month to get to know each other, have some conversations, and think about what it might mean to serve as chair and vice chair, with the expectation that we'll likely put it on the agenda for your next meeting. I'll say going into this that we hope with our staffing of the Basin Water Quality Council that your job as chair would not be onerous. You would be responsible for facilitating meetings, working with the staff to finalize the agenda items. But beyond that, shouldn't require too much additional work unless it's something you wanted to volunteer for. And then the vice chair would have the responsibility of serving in case the chair is unavailable, and also serving as backup and helping as needed. That was our general approach to chair and vice chair, but I wanted to just lay that out and hear from all of you if you think there's a different approach. If it's not on the agenda for elections for this month, but we definitely plan on it for next month. We could wait even longer if you so choose, but I wanted to get your thoughts and thinking about how we move forward in that area. Any questions about what it might be like to serve as chair of this august body? None. Wow. Anybody who thinks they might be interested, want to talk to Dean about it some more? All right. Well, I see we have a shy group. We will work on putting the election of chair and vice chair on the agenda for our next meeting. Between now and then, if you think it's something you might be interested in doing, reach out to Dean and let him know. And I'm sure he'd be happy to talk through what that might mean for you and your workload and timing and what he expects to be able to do to help you out if you're willing to serve in that role. So any further questions about that before we move ahead? All right, hearing none, I'm excited to hear that there's so many people volunteering that we'll have a contested election for chair and vice chair at our next meeting. Be very exciting. I'm already looking forward to it. So next we're going to hear from Dean. He'll talk a little bit about the required documents that we're going to be jumping into, part of that administrivia that I just mentioned a minute ago.
Excuse me. Thanks, Catherine. As has been mentioned, there are some keystone documents that the council will need to adopt before too much time goes by. We don't expect the council to build a set of bylaws or rules of procedure from the ground up. So I want everyone to know that we have a set of bare bones rules of procedure or bylaws and rules of procedure ready for the group to consider. These are based on some other bylaws that the Regional Planning Commission has had some involvement in, and they get to basic things like the legal basis and the name and the purpose of the organization and how membership and representation works and how voting will work and so on. I don't expect that people will be ready to ask too many questions about those now, but I will be happy to share the draft document that we've put together for people upon request. So I'm happy to send those out. Election of officers, terms of office, vacancies, and the duties and things like that. All the typical bylaw rules of procedure type things that you've seen before if you're involved with an organization like this. Are there any questions that people have about the draft bylaws and the fact that the group will have to adopt them? I don't see any.
And to Steve's point earlier, since we are the clean water service provider for the Missisquoi and Lamoille, we're at least starting out with them being similar, recognizing that each Basin Water Quality Council may choose to adjust them accordingly.
Yes, very good point. Thank you. Okay, so if we can continue on, the other document that I have mentioned that is specifically mentioned in the rules is a public participation policy. It is a document that both the council and the clean water service provider will be adopting or need to adopt jointly. So the same document needs to be approved by both. It's something that could be extensive or could involve a fair amount of time. I don't think many of you, I haven't got a lot of experience developing public participation policies for adoption. So our thinking is that an initial interim policy may be the way to go. It would be fairly bare bones. It would just describe the policy in the most general terms and maybe give some examples, talk about how this interim policy could be amended and adopted and made more permanent at some point in the future. But again, we don't expect the council to be building this from scratch. We have a working document, and it's something that could be considered at your next meeting or perhaps the meeting after that. Are there any questions about the public participation policy? And again, it is something that is specifically mentioned as a requirement. Some organizations, including other regional planning commissions, have public participation plans, so more extensive documents. And that's not to say that that you or the QUISP might have something like that someday, but the initial requirement is first for a policy. Or any questions about that? And if not, then the last thing I'll touch on is the guidance for the subgrants. There are, as I had said during my earlier presentation, a requirement for the QUISP, which will be this conduit funnel for funding to the different partners, to have guidance. We are working on that now. We have spent time updating our procurement policy. We have spent a bit of time working on an initial draft of a request for qualifications, something that could be used as part of a pre-qualification process. But basically, these would all be tools to help make the process of getting organizations on board, cleared to do work, and make the process of getting projects in a funded state as quickly and as easily as possible. And this too is something that would be shared with the group, perhaps as soon as your next meeting, although if not at your next meeting, perhaps the one after that. And my thinking is that your next meeting may focus on your rules of your bylaws and rules of procedure before you take up this question of the guidance for subgrants. Any questions about that before we go on? And don't be shy. If that's the case, then what we were hoping to talk about next are training needs. And I will just say that DEC has been working or having internal discussions about the types of training that it would offer on a, I keep on wanting to say a statewide basis, but it's really a Champlain Basin basis, but making it available to all of the QUISPs and all of the councils. So some of the training, a lot of the training, I would suspect early on will come through DEC. Some of it will perhaps be recorded and available as a video. I know that DEC has done a lot of recording of presentations, and you can watch them on YouTube, which I find very, very handy. But what we did at the Missisquoi meeting was to hear people's thoughts on the kinds of topics they would like to have training on, and I'll just try to get the conversation started by mentioning one of those examples, one of those suggestions, which was training on what is the difference between a regulatory project and a non-regulatory project, essentially getting at this question of, or in more detail, what types of projects would be eligible for QUISP funding. But I'd like to turn it over to folks here so that you could chime in with your thoughts and ideas so that we can begin to map out how this would occur.
Yeah, I would like to find out more about the buffer regulations, you know, what constitutes a regulatory buffer, what is not, but is, you know, is a best practices, the different kinds of buffers that have either gone in along the Lamoille or, you know, in the past, and how they've worked. So like maybe even a historical view of environmental changes along the Lamoille, either positive or negative. So it gets some perspective on how things have changed over, let's say, the last 50 years, or even maybe 100, you know, but something that would give us some depth in terms of what's occurred and how it's worked. and then some information about the kinds of riparian buffers there are, and what kinds of regulations there are in the state about those buffers.
Thanks, Jed. I've been doing a lot of typing while you spoke, so the clicking wasn't too bad. Anyone else?
Another item that was mentioned in the mid-Ciscoy meeting was, I think it was Kent who brought it up, was the idea of getting some training on how a project goes from being an idea to an actual funded project on the ground, and what that process will look like from start to finish. I see Peter gave a vigorous nod to your head when I said that.
Well, it's a good one because it's very complicated and dependent upon what that, is it agricultural? Is it a lake? Is it it all changes depending on the context. So it'd be a great training for people.
Yeah, I'd like to add to my point from last week, and speaking with various folks in both agencies, both Ag and ANR, to really define what can be in the QUIS purview as opposed to the Ag agency. I had a question last week about what is a certified small SFO and what is a non-regulated SFO, and how to get that sorted out. And then I've had different interpretations about co-benefits and how to weigh co-benefits in these projects. And I think I heard Dean say the word earlier in presentation, and just working to get a project in the Clean Water Portal. I had another discussion about co-benefits with my tactical basin planner. So I think we really need to get some of this really clarified so we can, working with the watershed groups or whoever's out there looking for the projects, I think it's really important that they have a real clear picture of what they're working with.
Great, thank you very much, Kent. And in the chat, we have Lauren, who's noted some training on the long-term effectiveness of stormwater BMPs and their maintenance. And Sarah has noted that it would be great to see a map of conserved lands in the whole watershed and to get a status of the floodplain mapping for the Lamoille.
Thank you for those. And I'm about to put into chat, and I know it doesn't give people much notice, but there is a clean water lecture series presentation that's happening Thursday at noon that is on the subject of getting projects from start to finish.
One more thing that I'm curious about is if there have been similar structures to the clean water service provider model in other places, in other states people, and if there has, it would be interesting to hear, I don't know, from something similar to get a better idea. I think people might benefit from having some idea of a model of this sort of setup occurring in the past. That might be interesting if that exists.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. That's a question that has occurred to me. I've done a little bit of research on it. Dea has done quite a bit, and that's something that we can address.
And Kent mentioned an SFO. What is that? I think he said an SFO or something like that.
Small farm operation.
Okay.
Go to the Vermont, go to the VFAAM website, and you'll have a description of the 3 regulated farm sizes and as a differentiated from the extremely small farms that don't fall under the regulation that evidently we're going to be dealing with.
Okay, thank you. And this, Dean, you mentioned the clean water, something at noon. Where is that being presented? I mean, it's online, but
yeah, it is I believe it's something that's DEC sponsored or UVM. I'm trying to keep my different lecture series straight. But because it's teams, I think it might be part of a DEC noontime session, and I can get that information out. But because it's coming up so quickly, I wanted people to have the link if they were curious. But I will send details when this meeting is done.
Great, thank you.
Any other suggestions, thoughts?
And it looks like Lauren also added that it'd be good to have the history of the TMDL. It would be for the context of when that total maximum daily load was adopted. And I'll add to that that we also talked to the Missisquoi about hearing from the basin planner. So that would be Danielle, just about the specifics of the implementation plan with the Lamoille Basin plan. And then Peter suggested that we could all use a refresher on the required agricultural practices and to what farms and sizes those required practices apply. We're hearing lots of great ideas about upcoming trainings and more information.
I will just throw out there that the history and background on the TMDL is one of those topics that DEC would be offering for the entire basin.
For all the Water Quality Council members in the Lake Champlain and Memphremagog Basin.
Yes, I believe that's their plan.
And Lauren's posted a rap quiz for your enjoyment in the chat. Any other training needs that people can think of now, recognizing this isn't the last time we'll have this conversation and things will come up as we go?
Thank you, Danielle, for the link, by the way.
Dean, I'm getting a call from a child, so I'm handing it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. We are almost at the end, folks. The last topic that we wanted to cover has to do with stipends. The QUISP process does have provisions for stipends to be paid to representatives on the council. It does start to get a little bit complicated. Some people who are involved with the council are eligible for their stipends through an organization that they're part of, because that organization has an agreement with another organization that makes this funding available. Some of you are employees of organizations that will pay for your time, so the stipend won't be necessary. Some of you are from municipalities, and those municipalities, I suppose, could choose to pay you your time, but probably haven't budgeted for it. And we would use a pool of funds that the Regional Planning Commission has as part of its agreement to pay for stipends. One of the open questions has to do with stipends being paid to alternates. And at this point, I'd have to say the answer is we don't have explicit authority to do that, but it does seem like one of the things that should occur in the not too distant future is to get that authority so that stipends can be offered to alternates as well as representatives. The way we've left it is that if you are interested in or concerned about stipends, get in touch with me by email, and then we will have a specific conversation about your situation and where you might get the stipend or where the stipend for you, if you qualify, would come from. Any initial questions? We are going into about 10 minutes or almost 10 minutes before 3, and I know that people have been working at this for quite a while. Any, and I see Catherine is back. We could conclude, we could make any general or final observations that people might want to make, talk a little bit about schedule. Catherine, would you like to interject anything at this point?
Nope, I think I'm all set. Thank you all so much for being here. I know we did talk about the idea that we will need to probably meet monthly for the next couple of months as we get organized and get everything ready. And Dean has been working with folks to try to identify when a good meeting time might be. Have you narrowed that down yet, Dean?
I am trying to pull that up momentarily.
And Dan, I see you have a question. Is it related to scheduling?
Not really a question. I just wanted to say hi, Dan.
Oh, right.
Chittenden
Yes,
County,
yes, we-
Chittenden County RPC, and I appreciate you guys handling this watershed because and many watersheds, but and also a shout out to Catherine Sonic and Kate for helping to represent the lower Lamoille, Chittenden County area. So appreciate it.
Welcome, Dan. I'm glad you're able to join us for part of the meeting.
Folks. Having another one of those moments where too much was on my screen at once. The question really is, generally speaking, daytime meetings have seemed acceptable to groups like this. And if we don't need to consider scheduling in the evening, we won't do that. And for this council compared to the Missisquoi Council, afternoons seem to be good meeting times. So where things appear to be headed is afternoons during the day on weekdays. And question about days of the week that have looked good based on responses that I have seen so far, which I'm still pulling up here because I thought I had it up before, but the window's now closed.
Dean, would it be fair to say that you will be in touch with the group with your top choices to just narrow down and make sure that works?
Yeah, I am intending to do that. I suppose I would just be interested in hearing from anybody who has significant objections, or not objections, but significant conflicts. 2 days of the week, probably Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays or Thursdays in the afternoon on particular dates or days of the month. So if you have a consistent conflict on Monday afternoons, on the third Monday, but not the first, second, or fourth, that would be a handy kind of thing to know. But we will be following up with some specific meeting times proposed, but we would like to get that so that we can begin to rely on a regularly scheduled meeting date for notice purposes. We don't foresee having the need to, I don't at least foresee the need to have monthly meetings for more than a few months, but we can never be sure. So hopefully no one is going to be gone for a long period of time during the summer. That would make things a little bit more challenging. We do expect to continue meetings in the hybrid format the foreseeable future, just because the size of the basin is so great and the distances are great. But at some point, we would like to at least offer the possibility of having people together if they should so choose.
Okay, thanks, Dean. So look for more information from Dean about the next meeting. We'll plan on it being virtual and within a month, about a month from now. And then we'll look for some regular meeting days and times as well moving forward. Are there final questions, thoughts, ideas, comments folks want to offer before we wrap up? All right.
That's a wrap, I think.
Thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate your being here today and your willingness to serve on the Basin Water Quality Council. I think we're going to get some really great stuff done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.